Hello friends, Adam here with FED. Today I want to talk about the most underrated spells in all of Three Houses. And I say underrated, what I mean by that is I don't think people talk about them enough for how helpful they are, and I think that they deserve more recognition. And when I say like they deserve more recognition, it's not like they have feelings and feel unappreciated. It's just that I think if players understood the value of these spells, they would use them more often. And it really kind of sheds some light on a few units that you would think are less good as healers or as mages essentially than they actually are. So I want to talk about those. But before we do that, make sure to tune in to tonight's live stream. We'll be starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, a little later than usual, but I got some stuff going on. But it's going to be fun. So chat sabotage, Three Houses, all that fun stuff going on tonight. Alright, underrated spells. I don't think there's really any black magic spells that are underrated. I think just in general, people appreciate them for their damage output and understand that they are really, really good. Right? Like if I had to say the only one that I can really think of that might be a little underrated is Blizzard. It has really low might. You know, it's like fire and like just like really low. Again, really low might. I get it, and it has bad hit compared to like fire that has the same amount of might. But I really like the 15 crit that it has, and I think that's a little slept on. I think the same kind of goes for Cutting Gale. I think Cutting Gale is slept on a little bit too. People sleep on Annette because she uses like wind magic and stuff. But Cutting Gale, 10 crit, 7 might, it's pretty good. Really high hit rate as well, which on Maddening can be pretty useful. So really other than that, I think attack magic is pretty well understood for what it is. You know, I think people appreciate Thoron for its extra range. People just appreciate like Anye's arrows or Ragnarok for really high damage output, Meteor and Bolting for range, all that good stuff. As far as black magic goes. Now I'm moving to dark magic, and I think there are a couple here that are worth talking about. So I don't see enough people talk about Swarm. Swarm is, you know, it's honestly, as far as like attacking, it's generally worse than Mire. Not Mire, sorry, Miasma. Generally worse than Miasma, which is like base dark magic, right? Has 5 might, 80 hit, whereas Swarm straight up is worse than both of those and has 4 might and 70 hit. And while that might be bad, what's really good about Swarm is its side effect. It reduces the foe speed by 5 for 1 turn. Now that is enough to reduce a foe to the point where either you have units that will double them, or makes it so that they can't double certain units, and just makes it, you know, safer to fight that enemy in general. And it's really good early game. Really good early game. 5 speed makes less of a difference in the end on Maddening, where there's, you know, assassins with like 55 speed or whatever it is. And you're just not going to match that unless you are grinding for days. You're not going to match that. You just aren't. But in the early game, where you have thieves that have like 11 speed or 14 speed, and you have units that have, you know, 10 or 11 or say maybe even 7 attack speed, lowering those guys by 5 makes a big difference. So Swarm, really, really good early game spell that I don't see talked about enough. Swarm is really good. Don't sleep on Swarm. Now let's move into the white magic, and this is where I think it actually gets pretty interesting. I don't think any of the attack magics are really slept on all that much. People appreciate them for what they are. Abrax and Aura, just big damage. Seraphim, effective against monsters, so you can break a monster's tile in 1 turn without using a gambit, which is always nice. And Nosferatu, everyone knows, you know. There's a few characters, and by a few, I can really only think of like 1 or 2 that can really take advantage of using Nosferatu in enemy phase to tank. But yeah, it's whatever. So I don't think any of these are underrated, but I think there's a bunch of the non-damaging white spells that are hugely and like horribly underrated. So everybody loves Fortify, Heal, and Physic. Most people will tell you that if your unit doesn't have Physic, like they're a bad healer. Physic is rather plentiful in the game. There's plenty of units that do have it. You know, your Mercedeses, your Happies, your Dorotheas. There's all sorts of units that have Linhardt. And then there's even like non quote unquote mage units that have Physic, like Ignots, Ingrid, that can make good use of it if you want them to, for like whatever reason. So yeah, these are 3 that people all appreciate, are well founded. The same goes for Warp. I'm sure everyone talks about Warp and how good it is, especially here on the channel. I love Warp. And Rescue to a lesser extent. I don't think it's not as useful as Warp, but it's still really, really good. But then there are 4 other spells that get slept on. So we have Recover. Recover just heals for a ton. See the base might, so at base you're healing with 30 HP with Recover, and then you add some magic to that and you're healing even more. So units that have Recover tend to not be the highest magic units in the game. Think of like Lorenz or Byleth. And a ton of other units get it too. Their magic might not be the highest, but Recover allows you to heal so much HP in one turn that it honestly makes up for that. And the fact that it's on like only 1 range, you would think would be bad, but it's on units that can be up in the front and be okay, like Byleth, Lorenz. I'm trying to think of other ones. Like I think there's a lot of just like characters that we wouldn't really call mages. People like Felix or I don't know. Does Sylvain get, or does Sylvain get Physic? I don't remember. I can't remember off the top of my head everyone who gets Physic. I mean, Recover. But it's really good, really slept on. Okay. Next, Silence. I talked about Silence a few videos ago now. That it essentially just makes it so an enemy unit can't use magic for a turn. Which for, you know, the enemy Warlocks or Grimoire or whatever, you essentially shut them down for an entire turn. And that just makes it so if you couldn't kill them, now you don't have to. In essence, you are killing that unit's for a turn, and then they come back to life the next turn. It's kind of how you can look at it. Unless it's like a Dark Knight or a Holy Knight, then they probably have a Lance on them too that can hurt you pretty bad too. But Silence is really great for taking out like long range magic people that you can't quite reach yet, like, you know, those enemies in like Blue Lions endgame, so Azure Moon endgame, that have like bolting and stuff. You can just like take them out for a turn until you can get there the next turn and whatever else. Really good that way. Next we have Ward, and Ward is okay, but again, I don't think it's talked about as much as it deserves credit. It's better in the early game, I'll admit that. Resistance +7 makes a lot more, like, makes a bigger difference in the first half of the game than it does in the latter half. That's just kind of how it goes with stat boosting items, because you get to a point where the enemy's magic is so high, or your own resistance is so high, one or the other, that +7 doesn't make that big a difference. But I thought I'd mention it before. Moving on to what I think is the 100% most underrated spell in the entire game. Most underrated spell in the entire game. That is Restore. Restore is just like bonkers. Bonkers good. And it just like makes me so sad that people don't talk about as much as it should be. So let's look at this effect. It cures any status conditions of allies in range. And it's a magic divided by 4 for range. In endgame, that can be pretty big. You know, endgame you can have that be, you know, up to 10 spaces if you if you actually train the unit, which is great. So it has 10 uses, so you're not going to run out of uses on any given map. And you're thinking, well, there aren't really that many status effects in Three Houses. You know, poison isn't very common or just doesn't exist, and it doesn't kill you in this game, and whatever else. But Restore is huge for one thing, one thing only, that nobody talks about. Restore cures the effect of being hit by a gambit. So you lose the benefit of your own battalion when you get hit by a gambit from an enemy, and you also just get like lower stats in general, I believe. I guess I could be wrong on that. I don't know why I would be though. And Restore cures that. And it doesn't just cure one ally. Say you have like 4, for whatever reason, you have like 5 allies lined up and they all get hit by Blaze or something, which has a big attack radius. But guess what? You're fine, because Restore just fixes it. It's awesome. It's really, really good. So don't sleep on Restore. Units who have Restore are invaluable, especially on Maddening, where enemies have decent Gambit hit rates, especially in the early to mid game. And then you're kind of fine for a while, then you get to late game, they have high ones again. high hit chances. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Those are what I think are the most underrated spells in all of 3 houses. Spells that I think are not talked about enough. So please let me know in the comments how you feel about these spells. What are some of your favorites that people don't talk about? And subscribe for more Fire Emblem discussions like this one. And don't forget, catch tonight's live stream. See you then.